So one of the decisions that a lot of private practice owners need to make is whether or not they want to accept or insurance or be on insurance panels. And a lot of that decision depends on the demographics of your area and what you feel like your clients need. And if you do decide to go on to insurance panels, or maybe just thinking about it, one of the ways to do that is to talk to the folks at Practice Solutions. They are absolutely the experts in insurance billing and credentialing, and they do all the hard work for you. They're who I use in my practice. So go check them out today, and you can find out about them by going to practicesol.com/Gordon and talk to Jeremy and his team, and they'll help you out in navigating the whole insurance piece and help you take the headaches out of it. This is the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, helping you to navigate your private practice journey. This is session number 80 of the Practice of Therapy podcast. Hello, folks. I'm Gordon Brewer, and welcome to the podcast. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, welcome. And if you've been listening for a while, welcome back. And I'm so glad you're letting me into your ears and into your life and joining me in this private practice journey. I'm so glad to have my guest today, and we're going to get to her a little bit later, but Vanessa Lech is a therapist in Raleigh, North Carolina, and Vanessa really kind of specializes in this whole anger management and addiction niche, and she's been doing some kind of unconventional things with her practice, and we're going to share those things of really thinking about how you can diversify your income streams and some things that she's learned along the way of just really kind of approaching private practice in a little bit different ways. So we'll get to Vanessa here in a minute, but one thing I did want to share with folks, and this is just kind of a quick story here. For those of you that listen know that I tend to be, or try to be, fairly transparent about my life and just share in things that I learned along the way. But I have a really dear friend, Dr. Keith Kramer, who is a cardiologist here in town. And Keith is in with a group of friends of us that get together pretty much every week. And we just sit around and tell stories, and we'll drink some scotch every now and then and smoke a cigar and maybe share a few craft beers. But it's just our little community, and we get together. I know on Sunday afternoons we call it our Sunday afternoon prayer meeting, but we'll rotate around to each other's porches and just sit out. If the weather's nice, sit out in the sun and just have a good time just being with each other. But anyway, Keith, I wanted to share this thing. Keith has recently come back from one of these kind of life-changing trips. Keith took a trek in Nepal to the Everest Base Camp, and it was like a 3-week deal for him, and he blogged about it along the way, and it's just an incredible journey. And so a bunch of us got together last night and listened to Keith's stories, and he showed us pictures and just had a good time hearing him. And I don't know that Keith necessarily listens to this podcast, but I just have to recognize my friend Keith for sharing that part of his life with us and just with me. It's just a truly moving story to hear all that he encountered in beautiful Nepal in the Himalayan mountains. It's just incredible journey. But anyway, that was on my mind because I've still been thinking about it and just really enthralled with all of that. But, the other thing I want to mention here just is something to think about as therapists, and just for those of us, just going about this really, to me, it's just almost it's very noble work what we do as therapists. And I think one of the things that is so important, and one of the things that I learned over and over again, is just the importance of community. And particularly, I am just so fortunate and so blessed to have the group of friends that I've got that are supportive, and our kids are friends and all kinds of things like that. And it's just great. And so I would encourage you to get out and make those connections and find communities for yourself, not only online, which that's pretty easy to do, but find them in your surrounding area and make those friendships. And as Brene Brown likes to tout, is being vulnerable. And one other thing real quickly is I would like to just put a shout out to her Netflix series. I think it's called The Call to Courage. Definitely go watch it. I've been recommending it to my clients here lately, and it's a great presentation. So go check it out. One other real quick thing before we get to Vanessa, I do want to let everyone know that the Money Matters in Private Practice course is ready. It is complete. All of the content is up, and it is available for you. And to get to that, you go to practiceoftherapy.com/finance course and go in there and enroll. And just for a little bit longer, like just by the time this episode comes out, it's just going to be a few more days. I'm going to have you can still get it at the pre-launch price of half off. And you can use the coupon code TAKE50, TAKE50. So go check that out. practiceoftherapy.com/finance course. So enough of me rambling, and plus I'm going to have to take a sip of water here. But anyway, without further ado, here's my friend Vanessa Lech and us talking about ways to diversify your practice and diversify your income in your practice, and really kind of think about your practice in unconventional ways. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome again to the Practice of Therapy podcast. And I'm so happy to have with me today Vanessa Lech. And Vanessa is a therapist, and she's in private practice in Raleigh, North Carolina. And I met Vanessa online, and we connected, and she's got some really cool stuff. And it's just, I was telling her before we started recording that I was doing some online stalking of her, and she's got some really neat stuff and a really cool practice. So welcome, Vanessa.
Thanks for having me, Gordon. I appreciate it.
Yes. So as I usually start with everyone, tell us a little bit about your private practice journey and how you've kind of landed where you've landed and what you do.
So I think the first thing to tell people is I wasn't planning on being in private practice. When I was in graduate school for this behavioral health care industry, I didn't even think about it at all. I was in school and I really had a very different path in mind, but as things go, life changes and things change. And so I did what a lot of people do, which is working at what I call these mental health sweatshops. I have like a whole chapter about mental health sweatshops, that's what I call them, in my book, Burnout, Self-Care for Behavioral Health Clinicians, where I experienced some burnout symptoms of my own. And that was a real interesting educational experience. Got a lot of great work experience. At the same time, I got a lot of great life experience through that as well. And it was through those experiences that I decided that I wanted to go ahead and work for myself. And I did a lot of research and thinking about that for an extended period of time. And I didn't even know I could do it because I didn't know the regulations in my state allowed for that. My clinical supervisor told me, and I couldn't believe it. Like, I had no idea, because I'd actually been told the opposite. I'd been given false information by various people that I believed, to include one of the managers at the place I worked. So anyways, I transitioned into private practice, and I'm so glad I did, because it is not rainbows and sunshine and butterflies. I'm not trying to make out like that. I think some people make out like that and make it seem like it's just some like magical journey. And it's definitely not. Like, I'm still working at things. Things are not perfect at all for me, but For me, it's given me a really good work-life balance thus far. My husband's in the military. It's given me a lot of flexibility. He's on active duty to manage my personal life. I know you mentioned that, Gordon, on one of your podcasts where you were saying that you had your wife, I think, broke her ankle and you had a relative that was needing some extra care and that you were adjusting your own work schedule to accommodate that. And a typical job like the ones I worked at were not accommodating at all. Even if they said they would be, they weren't.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
And I didn't have that situation, but, just hypothetically speaking. So that's been really great. It's also given me opportunity to further pursue other interests I have outside of just clinical work. In my experience, and I know, once you get to a certain point in your career, certain credentials, depending upon your geographical location, you can have more opportunities. However, that wasn't available to me fresh out of school. And so the kinds of places that were available to me were mental health sweatshops that really exploit people. And they're all about those face-to-face clinical billable hours to the extreme. And that's a great way to burn out. And so being in private practice, I have more opportunities to do other things and other types of work and be a lot more creative. So that's nice.
Yes, yes. And one of the things that you have just really done well is diversify your income streams. I mean, really looking at other ways to I guess, to use the vernacular, monetize your practice, besides just sitting in front of clients or exchanging your time for money. You want to tell folks a little bit about some of the things that you've come up with? Because I think that's one of the things that most people realize in private practice eventually is that there is a limit to the number of face-to-face hours that you can do with a client. And there's only so many hours in a day.
No, I totally agree with you. I think the trap that people get involved in private practice, and I think it's to probably learn it from these agency environments too that I keep mentioning, is that the one-to-one, like individual therapy sessions, one-to-one, indefinitely, and that's it. And that's all that they really know. And that's a really great way to burn out over a period of time because it's really draining individual therapy, one-on-one sessions, especially if you're doing what some people do, which isn't uncommon for I've seen therapists to do 8 to 12 of these sessions in a day. Like that's overwhelming. And then several days in a week. I mean, it's just a great recipe for burnout, essentially. But the number one thing is I didn't actually know that people were even interested, other therapists, in doing more than that and diversifying their income until I started hearing about it from other people. And I hear people really wanting to get into it after they've reached the point of burnout. And that's really a bad time to try to look at other things. You need to be looking at it as a preventative, not as an afterthought. And so the number one way I think to diversify your income is your thought process. You have to be creative in your thinking. And so like, I never went into this thing, I'm going to diversify my income and have an unconventional practice. Like, that was not how it started. Actually, how it all started for me was before I even, I guess I was still in school and I started doing self-publishing and started writing my own books about health and wellness type topics. And that's how that started.
Yes.
And then I was enjoying it as a very creative outlet for me. I just enjoy that. And I'm actually working on another book right now, but I'm always working on something, but it's not going to be out for like a long while. Anyways, but when I was working on these mental health sweatshops, for me, it was a creative outlet. It was a stress relief to work on creative projects. And so I was channeling that burnout experience I was having and that I was hearing all these other clinicians talk about into the book, Burnout, Self-Care for Behavioral Health Clinicians. And that for me was very energizing. I mean, I would have these crazy long days working in a crisis center with people that were, very high needs, very volatile, in and out of hospitals. And for me, it was just energizing to work on something like that. It's hard to put into words. Like it was very cathartic for me, like what that did for me.
Right.
And to really see it come to fruition, like this project I was working on. And now I've just done the second edition of the book, I updated it and stuff. But that's how it started. It didn't start like I'm going to sell this thing or I'm going to monetize this. It just started like, this is really what I want to do with my time. And then it turned in later on, you're like, I'm really proud of this. So, maybe I could show people this. And now I have an online retail store, which is 100% separate from my practice website. They're totally separate. And I really just had a good experience with that. And then like the anger management game right here, this once again wasn't something where it's upside down. something where I was like, oh, I'm going to create something with my knowledge and monetize it. I was actually working at this crisis center with most of my clients were involved in the criminal justice system.
Yes.
And I really enjoyed it. And I was doing more of that type of work. And most of my peers, my counselor coworkers didn't want to do that work. They're like, give us the women and children. You can go do that. And the person that did a lot of that, this substance abuse work and court-ordered anger management, they stopped working. There was high turnover place, go figure. Anyway, so I took over that workload and I just noticed a shortage of adult therapy tools, period. I noticed there was a lot of therapy games for children.
Yes.
And they were inappropriate for adults and especially adults, men, you know what I mean? So I wanted to create a gender neutral therapy game. And I used these really cheap little leftover agency business cards that weren't being used in Elmer's glue. And I just tested it out and it had a really good response. And then I paid to have it professionalized in a factory here in America. And I was using it for my own use. I was solving a problem I had, fulfilling a need I had immediately because, once again, these places weren't real supportive of our work and they weren't really giving us the tools we needed to do our work. So I was just creating it for myself, essentially. And then later on, once again, I added that to my online retail store. And so that's how that came about. But as you see, it wasn't like coming from the angle of like, I'm going to diversify my income and have unconventional practice and monetize my stuff. It was this is my life. And it was born out of that. It was born out of my existing work.
Wow. Yeah. And I can relate to that so much because I think about back, so our stories are similar in that I started out working in an agency. And I think one of the things that you said earlier that just struck a chord for me is that when we get to that place of being burned out, finding a creative outlet is really kind of the redeeming factor for a lot of people. And I know that was true for me, but because I started working on, okay, I'm going to start a private practice. So let me do my paperwork and all that sort of thing. And then I love that idea of solving your own problems and then being able to take those problems that you're solving for yourself and being able to share it with others. And the money comes from that. And it's not that, like you said, intentionally going after, I'm going to figure out something to make money or to monetize. You're truly helping people in a different sense. And that's exactly what I've been learning over and over again is just helping people and then the money will come. And being able to think outside the box, just like you did.
Very much so. And that's the thing, that creative thought process of just thinking independently about things. I mean, that's key. That's key no matter what.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So sorry, I was taking a sip of coffee. Well, another thing that you talked about, Vanessa, which I think is going to be intriguing for folks is that, I know that from what you mentioned is that now you were in the service as well, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Well,
I was on active duty in the Army, that's for sure. And it's funny because people some people will look at me and be like, never guess that. And I understand that, my mother-in-law still doesn't believe it, evidently. Like she tells everyone her son's in the Army and I don't think she still thinks I was. I don't know.
Well, thank you for your service. I just wanted to say
thank you for your support.
Yeah. And so, but the thing about that is that you were telling me ahead of time that your husband's probably going to be moved. And so you're going to have to pull up and move your practice. And you've already been thinking about that. And so tell folks a little bit about that. And, I don't want you to have to disclose something you don't want to, but tell folks a little bit about that process.
No, I'm very comfortable disclosing what I'm going to disclose. It's no big deal. So basically I'm tentatively planning on relocating this year with my spouse to Virginia. It's tentative right now, and that's about 200 miles roughly from where I'm physically located now. I'm at a place called Fort Eustis, Virginia. It's near around there. I'm not going to be like on the base, but like around that area. Anyways, And so fortunately, it's not that far away. I mean, everything is very tentative right now. So like anything I say, just keep in mind, it might subject to change. But basically the plan is that I'm very hopeful. There's this thing called, oh my gosh, I think it's called veterans.gov/mil spouses for any of you military spouses listening to this right now. And also you can reach out to me if I screwed up that website, FYI. But basically the Department of Labor has put together a really great website where it's got a color-coded map for military spouses. And it's basically, they've now created legislation in a lot of states specifically regarding occupational licenses in all industries. For military spouses, because it is such an issue. I think they really need to nationalize these licenses, but I know the states don't want to let go of the revenue. Yeah. And it's really creating a lot of issues for regular people as well as military spouses. And so Virginia seems to be pretty friendly. Texas is like the world's most friendly military state ever. Like they're like, we'll give you an occupational license if you have one already, period, if you're a military spouse. You know what I mean? They're like real friendly. But most states aren't like that. But Virginia seems to be pretty friendly. I'm hoping that that will be the case, and that they will honor the license I have and, reciprocate to some extent. And so, if that works, basically my plan is to open a practice there as well, to keep the practice I have here. My plan is, and of course this is subject to, everything. There's a lot of regulations in our industry, so I have to double check everything, but I'm hoping to have a 100% virtual practice in North Carolina in the future. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking I'll probably work with military people to some extent because I have extensive knowledge in that area. And I'm planning on possibly taking TRICARE insurance in the future. And I'm actually going to be consulting with that biller that you had as a sponsor in one of your episodes at the beginning.
Okay.
I have a consultation with them next week scheduled because I don't want to deal with that because that's a great way to burn out two insurances.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And so basically doing a virtual private practice in North Carolina, taking one insurance, which would be TRICARE, and then doing a little bit of virtual in Virginia, hopefully, and then the rest physical. And basically, my company name right now is called Carolina Addiction Anger Management. I'm actually thinking about updating it slightly and making it less regional because of the move and crossing state lines. And I'm thinking about doing DUI groups out there for court-ordered people. I currently do a lot of court-ordered type anger management group therapy as of late. And then also doing a little bit of TRICARE work with the military people. So basically, the unconventional practice in the sense that it's going to be virtual, it's going to be physical, there's going to be groups, there's going to be individuals, there's going to be court-ordered, there's going to be voluntary. So it's like quite a mixture. And I want to keep that going for several reasons. One, I think it prevents burnout to have variety in your work. Two, we are moving forward in an online world. Look at us right now. We're online right now. We have never met physically in person. I think the demand for those types of services are only going to grow. Mm-hmm. And the fact of the matter is, I really enjoy working with people involved in the criminal justice system to some extent. And there's a need for that. There just is. And there's also a need for people to work with the military community as well. And TRICARE, just like all these other insurances, isn't necessarily the most fun. And most people aren't familiar with the needs of the military community because they haven't been in the military. They're not, military spouse. They haven't been immersed into that environment, that culture, that community, and they don't really know what those needs are. So that's kind of how I plan to move forward. Of course, it's subject to change, a lot of variables beyond my control, but that's basically kind of like the outline of what I'm planning. And so I think it's going to be a smooth move, actually. There's virtual offices that are in abundance. They're competing for business. And so they have a lot of different services now where you can rent offices for, instead of doing a committed lease where you're spending $500,000 a month on office space, you can rent by, what time you need it for. There's virtual receptionist services you can get, virtual assistants. I know you mentioned, I think you have one.
Yes.
There's virtual mail services, HIPAA compliant assistants that can scan in your mail. So there's a lot of services these days where you can work remotely, which is nice. And you can keep those costs down because there's no way faster to kill some of your efforts to earn money than paying $1,000 a month in rent for an office you're not using all the time.
Right. Yeah. Well, that is, I love that because, I think as the more we go along, the more things are going to change. And I think I agree with you. I wish we had kind of universal license portability more available. But I think that's what's also neat to me is that, or cool to me rather, is just the fact that you're already thinking outside the box and you're thinking ahead. And it sounds like you don't have a whole lot of angst around it.
No, I don't. The fact of the matter is the world is constantly changing and constantly evolving, and we have to as well. What's nice about owning your own company is that it gives you some freedom and flexibility to make some of those changes ahead and stay ahead. Versus when you're an employee or working for someone else, you really don't have that flexibility in most companies. They're not going to really care what you have to say
Right.
much of the time. And so it gives you a little bit more freedom, kind of carve your own path. And I really wish that in our country, entrepreneurship was more focused on, and certainly in our side of our industry as well. So I think that's where you can have the most kind of growth and positive change moving forward. In our industry, I mean, my God, I just know in graduate school and just in the industry as a whole, most people were just talking about going to work for some agency, and that's all they wrote, basically,
Right.
And so, that in itself is a bit of a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember one time when I was more, I guess, a little more active on LinkedIn. There was, I had posted something about being in private practice, and there was a person that came on there and actually said, you never can make any money in private practice. It's a waste of time. I'm paraphrasing what they said. Of course, that went all over me, but, it was just really, really, how do you have that opinion, or how do you come to that conclusion? Especially if you've never worked in that setting. I think, and you're right, back in when I first was in graduate school, that seemed like the only two paths were is either you teach or you go into some sort of agency work. And I think, and what's and you've got me on a roll here, Vanessa, but one of the things too is it's amazing to me how many clients I get in my private practice that come to us specifically because they don't want to deal with an agency. And they've had a bad experience with the kind of the mental health mills that are out there, and and it's and I think the court systems need to be educated as well, because I think that's all they know to do is they rubber stamp okay, anger management or parenting or whatever, and then they send them to an agency just to kind of wash their hands of it. And
well, the court system, so judges in my experience have had really good experiences with them because they've gotten some level of education about mental health care to where they at least know it's necessary. However, lawyers, I have not found that to be as much of the case, and they have such a limited amount of knowledge of this industry anyways, that they do not know the insides and outs. They don't know about these mental health sweatshops. They do not understand of the ins and outs of it. So I think it's just a lack of knowledge about that.
Right.
And then I know in the areas that I've worked here in North Carolina, there's a lack of people interested or willing to work with people involved in the criminal justice system. And oftentimes, sometimes, in my experience, the agencies that do are very, exploitive of their situation and of the court-ordered issue.
Right.
And so there's that as well. And so, but they do have an option of where they can go, in my experience, for their services. And there is an option, the DUI, DWI, depending on what state is and what it's called. That's different because that's so regulated now. Like in this state, I can't do that. Like I couldn't offer those services because it's so regulated. And all the states, my understanding, is very regulated. So now there's a lack of options because of that. In the state I'm going to, I've contacted them already. My understanding is I will be, once I get there, everything, God willing, works out, I will be eligible to do that in that state because regulations are different. And so I'll be able to. So there's a lot of ins and outs. There's a lot of regulations in this industry, and then there's just a lot to it. And then there's lack of knowledge of stuff with the court system as well. There are some things when they do like fitness to stand trial evaluations, that I know, and there's certain credentialing around that. And so I think that they're a little bit more up on that because they're like, okay, we have to send it to this person, send these people to this person who has those credentials to do this,
Right. Yeah. So one of the things I'm wondering, that maybe if you'd be willing to share, Vanessa, if somebody wanted to kind of tap into that niche of doing like anger management, parenting classes, that kind of thing, what have you found that works well with that? Because I think it's at least in my mind, that is, if a person really wanted to focus on that, and if they had the heart for it, that would really be a goldmine for a lot of people in terms of offering those kinds of things.
So it depends. So I know a lady, God, I'm forgetting her name off the top of my head. She's in the South as well. She's in Alabama, I believe. And she has really gotten a strong start in that area of work from the beginning. She's been a number of years now. And she specializes in and actually I know someone in this state that does that as well. High conflict divorcing couples in custody battles and divorce battles. So family court stuff. And oftentimes they're court ordered to go find, work with a counselor person who's willing to help them put together a co-parenting plan and help them resolve their issues. She also does mediation for these people. And I think she co-facilitates it with a lawyer, from what I recollect. That's this lady in Alabama. I'm forgetting her name. She was actually on my podcast a while ago. So you can go hunting through the archives there. But anyways, she was actually going to CLE, which is continuing legal education events, and put it as a sponsor and putting up her table and passing out her information about that. So that's one of the ways she connected. And then she also did presentations about what she offered at some of these CLE events, continuing legal education events, which is what it's called. They're mandatory for lawyers in all states that I'm aware of, and would tell them about that. And that's how she started getting referrals. And she also somehow or another, I think the court system found out about her, and so they referred directly to her. And the reason for that was because oftentimes you may be in a situation where there's just not a lot of options. Because I will tell you right now, I don't work with children, and I do not work with couples. So like that's already something I'm not going to do. And a lot of people aren't going to want to do it because family court's rough. Right. Family court, I think, is rougher than criminal court, in my opinion. And so they don't want to get, a lot of behavioral health care clinicians don't get dragged into the middle of that, because if you are working with people that are involved in the court system, and that is predominantly the work you can do, you can bet your bottom dollar at some point you're going to be deposed, you're going to be subpoenaed, you're going to have to testify as a witness, you're going to have to talk to a judge at some point, you're going to have to talk to lawyers at some point. I mean, it's like it's going to happen at some point.
Right.
And so he has had to go a couple of times to court to be an expert witness about different things. She has a good court policy. Nicole Stoller-Peterson, I believe, is the person, if I got her name correct.
Okay.
That talks about court stuff, because she's done a lot of court work herself. Like, she did child protective services for a while, then she went to private practice, and then she was working with lawyers, my understanding is from podcasts she did, to help kind of interpret and help people understand. I think there was like child abuse cases, child custody cases, family court stuff. And so you have to really have your paperwork tight, and I've had lawyers look over my paperwork. I have a robust court policy. And so you really have to be careful with those details. You really got to be prepared for that kind of thing, because, the other person I know here in Raleigh, she's been to court as well over these issues called in as a witness. And then there's child custody evaluators. That's a whole other thing. So you have to know your limits of what you can do. You know what I mean? So I know, like I said here, the DWI, I think it's called DWI thing. I can't do that in this state because the requirements are above and beyond what I am able to meet or even want to even think about.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I think that
you have to know you have to know your stuff, basically.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I think to me, the take-home point with that is that all of those things are unconventional ways of doing stuff in the realm of the mental health field and what we do just kind of professionally. You know, I've had friends of mine that where I was in graduate school with that went and got the certification here in Tennessee to become, oh shoot, my mind just went blank. Become not advocates. Crap.
Child custody evaluators?
No, it's
Witness to stand
mediation. Mediation. Right? Yeah. So I may or may not edit this out. So if I didn't, I apologize, folks. But yeah, the people that have gone and gotten the certification to become court mediators or family mediators, and it has been just so lucrative for them. In that they could charge what they wanted, and they're not limited by insurance companies and that sort of thing. So that's I just think there's a lot of opportunity for people if they really want to get out there and hustle and learn about those things. But I would say too, Vanessa, is don't go into that stuff if it's not something you enjoy.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, and you have to be real prepared for the realities of working, because I've seen firsthand a lot of clinicians run away from phone calls from lawyers or whoever. You can't have that mentality if you're going to do this work. You can't be scared of the people in the system. If you are, then like this isn't for you. And it also varies widely because like nothing is instant. It's going to take time to get up and running. It's going to take time for people to know you. You're going to have to market your services and get the word out about yourself and your company. It's just a fact. You're going to have your systems in place. You know, for example, I have an answering service 24/7. It takes all my phone calls for my practice because I know after like the first 2 months in practice, like, oh my God, I cannot handle incoming calls like on demand.
Right.
Anyways, and that's helped tremendously with the admin part of even just screening out people that like I don't even need to talk to. Maybe they just needed like some basic admin info and now they have it and they know this isn't gonna, be what they wanted or whatever.
Right.
If I don't offer the service they want, for example, or whatever. But for example, in North Carolina, if I'm not mistaken, I think I read, and if anyone's listening to this is like a regulatory person, like, okay, if I mess up something here, but I looked at mediation, for example, and you don't have to, some states, my understanding is basically a lot of the lawyers want to hire other lawyers to be mediators. And if you're not a lawyer mediator, you don't have a JD degree in that license, and they don't really want it to be bothered with you because they want a lawyer. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Another thing to keep in mind is that I know that from knowing lawyers. And another thing to keep in mind is that some of the rules, the way they're written, are wanting you to do some things at a certain rate or discounted or free a certain amount. So that's something else to keep in mind. That in like the DWI thing in this state, I'm pretty sure, and it may be other states as well, just off the top of my mind from my memory, is regulated about how much you can charge for those groups, those classes. So, there's those restrictions as well. Right. So those are kind of things to keep in mind as well. And so yeah, just stuff like that. Right.
Well, Vanessa, I want to be cognizant of your time, and I appreciate you being on the podcast. And boy, we could talk about this for a long time, I know. And hopefully I can get you back. Maybe do a follow-up if you make that move and see where you are in your journey there, and spreading your wisdom for others that might be in the same situation. But tell folks how they can get in touch with you and a little bit your websites and some of your products and all of that. And I'll be sure and have this in the show notes as well.
So my online retail store for the therapy tools that we talked about today was therapistassets.com. Also, the other domain is VanessaLechShop.com. My private practice website, which is totally separate, is CarolinaAddictionAnger.com is where it can be found. Even if I change the name, that domain, I'll keep it active. And I'm all over social media. Lately, I've been most active on Instagram, although you seem like me, it's like an explosion all over social media, though. Yeah. So my Instagram is @GoVanessaLech.
All right. Thanks, Vanessa. I'm so good. Again, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. And I'll be sure, like I said, to include your contact information and all of that in the show notes. This has just been great. I've learned a lot from you today.
Thank you for having me, Gordon. I appreciate it.
Okay. Well, take care.
Bye.
Well, I'm so thankful to Vanessa for being on the podcast. I'm always thrilled to find people that are kind of like-minded and tend to think outside the box. And Vanessa has just done a great job at really rethinking the way that we do private practice and the way that we go about it. And what I love about doing the podcast is exactly what happened today on this episode is we just kind of went down some of these rabbit trails, started talking about different things and different aspects. And what I love is being able to hear people's enthusiasm and just really being into what they're doing in their practices. And so I would commend to you Vanessa's resources, and do check out her podcast. I know it's going to be one that I'm going to be referring clients to. And the name of her podcast again is, let me get to it here. I just had it pulled up, Unraveled, and the subtitles Addiction and Anger Management. And so you can find that on any of the podcatchers out there like iTunes and Google Play and Stitcher, Spotify, and all of those wonderful places. So you can get it there. So go check it out. And we'll have links in the show notes show summary as well. So do go check out Vanessa's stuff, and do check out our sponsor for today's show, Practice Solutions, and you can find them over at practicesol.com/Gordon, and check them out. They are a big help to me in my practice, and they help me with all those billing and insurance claims and credentialing and all of that, which can be just terribly complicated, but they are great folks. So practicesol.com/Gordon. So go check them out today. Thanks again, folks, for joining me on the Practice of Therapy podcast. Do take time to subscribe wherever you might be listening to the podcast. Take care, folks. Been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer. Please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com for more information, resources, and tools to help you in starting, building, and growing your private practice. And if you haven't done so already, please sign up to receive the free private practice startup guide at practiceoftherapy.com. The information in this podcast is intended to be accurate and authoritative concerning the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, or producers are rendering legal, accounting, or clinical advice. If you need a professional, you should find the right person for that.